Tonight's big stories. Vice President Sara Duterte makes waves for saying she's skipping this year's State of the Nation address and appointing herself the designated survivor.
Former presidential spokesperson Roque once again denies allegations that he served as legal counsel of raided Pogo Lucky South 99, but the Senate still wants to summon him to the next hearing.
And on the eve of the 8th anniversary of the arbitral ruling, China digs in and reaffirms that it is rejecting the landmark 2016 ruling.
Good evening. Welcome to the show. I'm Regina.
I'm Gretchen.
And I'm Shawn.
Well, Vice President Sara Duterte has gone viral once more, this time for saying that she'll be skipping the president's upcoming State of the Nation address.
This marks the first time she'll be absent from the SONA. And more than that, it was in how she painted herself. She said she was appointing herself designated survivor. That caught the public's imagination.
So what exactly did Vice President Duterte mean by that? And what is a designated survivor, in case you missed the TV show? Maureen Enriquez with a big story tonight.
No. Okay. No, I will not attend the SONA. I am appointing myself as the designated survivor.
Following weeks of speculation, Vice President Sara Duterte has confirmed that she will not be attending the president's third State of the Nation address on July 22. Instead, she caused a stir by saying she's appointing herself the designated survivor. What exactly is a designated survivor? In the U.S., a designated survivor is an individual from the presidential line of succession, generally a cabinet official, who is kept separate from the president and other officials during the State of the Union address in case of a disaster. There is no designated survivor in the Philippines, but under our constitutional line of succession, the vice president will take over when the president can no longer perform his duties, followed by the Senate president and then the Speaker of the House. House Secretary General Regina Velasco believes the Vice President was only making a joke.
Well, ako personally kasi alam mo yung pamilya ni BP mapagbiro eh. So, ang tingin ko biro lang yun eh. Because under our laws, wala or our constitution, there's no such thing as designated survivor. So, kailangan magkaroon talaga tayo ng batas na gano'n. Tapos baka kailangan ilagay sa constitution yun eh. That means we have to amend the Constitution.
VP Sara did not give an official reason for her absence at the upcoming SONA. But for political analyst Richard Haydarian, this is just another strong indication that the unity team is dead.
This time, mukhang wala ng pretension to any kind of unity. So, in a way, that's a snub. In a way, yun yung clear expression ng discontent niya. Sa nangyari ngayon pagdating sa state of play. At of course, in a way, hindi rin surprising to after yung kanyang resignation from the cabinet.
According to Haydarian, this could be seen as a move similar to how former Vice President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo assumed the presidency when former President Erap Estrada stepped down. If this were to happen, the Vice President could still run for president in 2028. Haydarian adds it could also be seen by some as a threat in reference to a fictional thriller on Netflix where a low-level cabinet official in the U.S. became president after an attack claimed the lives of other high-level officials, including the U.S. president.
Again, this is crazy. This is conspiracy theory. But ang point ko is, alam naman siguro nila Sara Duterte na ang daming mga rumors, conspiracy theories, and all of that. So for her to talk about designated survivor, which is a series about a cataclysmic attack on the president and those next in line of succession. I just don't think this is helpful. Is this a veiled threat? Is this a joke? Is this a kind of just a sloppy statement without any consideration for the special circumstances we have?
Manila Representative Joel Chua meanwhile chided the vice president, saying given the current political tensions, such a joke is not in good taste because the security of the president of the Philippines is not a joking or laughing matter. Great care is taken to ensure the security of the president, especially during the SONA. He added that the VP does not have such appointing power for a designated survivor. For House Speaker Martin Romualdez, every public official has the prerogative to decide on their attendance at significant events. However, he says the SONA is a crucial moment for unity and collaboration among our nation's leaders. It is a time to reflect on our progress, address challenges, and outline our vision for the future. But despite the Vice President's absence, Romualdez says the House of Representatives remains committed to working with all branches of government to ensure that President Marcos's SONA reflects our collective efforts to improve the lives of Filipinos. He adds that unity and collaboration will continue to guide us forward. House Secretary General Reginald Velasquez says he will await the Vice President's official confirmation of her absence from this year's SONA. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
Designated survivor. I know you haven't watched it, but I think now you will have.
I think a lot of people will end up watching it just because of what she said today. But here's another little trivia for you. We actually used to have a bill that former Senator Ping Lacson was meant to pass into law, and he filed it in 2019 to create
enable
a designated survivor law, but it languished in Congress because the House eventually withdrew the version.
He also had a tweet. This is why we're talking about Senator Ping Lacson. He said, "This is a rhetorical statement, but a good soundbite nevertheless. She is the constitutional successor to the president, not needing an appointment as the designated survivor," which, by the way, is still a pending legislative measure in Congress. So that was that bill.
So siya naman talaga yung designated survivor, even if there's no such label yet in the Constitution.
Not really, because let's take a look at
It's a
Senator
line of
Lacson's bill. Senate Bill 982 is what he filed, and it says it's trying to appoint an acting president, basically, and it spells out the whole line of succession. So it says, in the event both Senate President and Speaker of the House are unable to act as acting president, the most senior senator, based on the length of service in the Senate, will be first in the line of succession. And then after that, acting president, and then, after that is the most senior representative in the House, in the lower house, based on the length of service as well. And if there's none, the third in line will be the member of the cabinet designated by the president. And what's more interesting about it is the second part of that bill, which says the president shall designate a member of the cabinet to be sequestered in a secret and secure location.
Which
Just
that
again,
part, that part was exactly as in that TV show with Kiefer Sutherland. But again, I have a quick mnemonic for the line of succession. You have to check up the plate numbers, and then you will see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, really. I mean, that's how.
But the point
It's
is
really
that
how
there is the Constitution defines the line of succession, but the designated survivor law that Senator Ping Lacson filed was meant to identify
different.
another person who will be sequestered away from these high-level meetings in the event of, disaster. Right?
In case they are in one place all at the same time, right?
As in the case of the State of the Nation address, that's right. So there has to be that other extra person that
So just to give you a quick,
by the president.
I think this would be the most simple way to explain it in the TV show. It was their version of the SONA, which is the State of the Union address. And then they had selected the housing secretary, who was kind of like, he was outside the kulambo, so to speak. So he was the designated survivor.
He wasn't in the inner circle.
He wasn't.
He was a middling cabinet official.
Yes, a hardworking one, of course. But they had selected him because, they
Because he was no threat. Is that why?
He was no threat. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And then somebody
I
blew
got the
up.
gist of it.
Well,
Okay.
One thing's for sure. What a way to make a statement with not attending the SONA.
Exactly.
What a soundbite, as Senator
soundbite.
Lacson said.
And now we know what a designated survivor is.
Okay, speaking of big stories tonight, let's move on over to this one. Did Harry Roque lawyer or lobby for the Pampanga Pogo or not? Now, since his name was dropped by PAGCOR Chairman Al Tenco at yesterday's Senate hearing, the former presidential spokesman has been under fire. But he did tell our sister program on Radio 5 that he never served as legal counsel to any Pogo, not even the embattled Lucky South 99. Arian Calumbiran with the story.
Former presidential spokesperson Harry Roque has vehemently denied allegations linking him to a raided Pogo hub in Porac, Pampanga. In an interview with Ted Filon and DJ Chacha on Radyo 5, Roque said he never served as a legal counsel to any Pogo, including Lucky South 99, which was raided by the police in June, and insisted his client was Whirlwind Corporation, which he said was just a service provider to Lucky South 99.
Pero ang Whirlwind po, hindi po siya Pogo operator. Siya po yung nagpapaupa doon sa Lucky South 99 na siyang merong lisensya dati ng Pogo at siya rin po ang service provider.
When asked how he met Cassandra Leong, Roque described her as the corporate secretary of Whirlwind, responsible for signing all pleadings filed with the Court of Appeals, RTC Angeles, and MTC Porac. Roque said he first met them as venture capitalists promoting projects including a liquefied natural gas plant in Bataan and a solar project in Cebu. As for the land used for the Pogo operations, Roque noted it is still owned by the Cruz family.
Sa ngayon po pag-aari pa rin po yan ng pamilyang Cruz. Nagdidimandahan po, kaya nagkaroon ng problema itong Whirlwind. Pumasok sila sa isang contract of lease doon sa tatay, si Roberto. Eh ang nangyari pala, ang registered owners, yung mga anak. At hindi naman alam, Whirlwind, na nagdidimandahan yung ama at saka yung kanyang mga.
Roque also expressed confidence that the ongoing Senate hearings will not uncover any new information that would link him to illegal Pogo activities.
Wala po talaga silang mahahanap dahil ako po'y wala kaugnayan sa kahit anong Pogo. Ay, kaya lang naman po ako naugnay dyan dahil nga alam ng mga korte sa Angeles, sa Porac na ako talaga'y tumatayong abogado.
As for the news that his bank documents and those of his former executive assistant were linked to Lucky South 99 by the PAOK, Roque says he'll welcome an investigation.
Mag-imbestiga po sila kasi mali naman ang sinabi nila. No? Si Altenco po, in fact said, hindi ko po pineressure ang PAGCOR. So mali po ang premise nila to begin with. At yan po ay attachment sa isang affidavit of support. So let us just comply with the law. No? Meron po tayong bank secrecy. I never waived my right to bank secrecy. At kung gusto po nilang imbestigahan yan, feel free po.
Roque also stressed multiple times that PAGCOR Chairman Altenco's sworn testimony did not accuse him of lobbying for Pogo licenses.
Ang sinabi lang niya sa akin, diretso siya. Yung pakiusap na magkaroon ng rescheduling of payment dahil naging biktima ng estapa nga yung Lucky South. So, wala nga pong usaping lisensya dun eh. So, anyway, I take it for what it's worth, no? Dahil yan po ang naging testimonya niya. Pero ang pakiusap ko nga lang sa media, sana maging makatotoo naman sila dun sa mga sinabi mismo ni Altenco nung siya po ay under oath.
Roque has gone so far as to threaten to sue news outlets including One News, Rappler, Inquirer, and UNTV over reports saying Tenco identified him as the one who lobbied for illegal Pogos. Aryan Kalumbiran, we are One News.
Despite his explanation, Senator Risa Hontiveros, who chairs the Senate Committee on Women and Children, remains unconvinced and is determined to summon Roque to the next hearing.
So, abogado siya ng Pogo Company, hindi lamang ng may-ari ng lupa kung saan nakatayo yung Pogo, ay siya po'y iimbitahin namin sa susunod na hearing, pati po si dating PAGCOR Chair Domingo.
Senate President Cheese Escudero believes the allegations against Roque are serious and Roque himself should address the issue. He says, I hope Roque will use the opportunity in the Senate to explain. The Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Commission also plans to include Roque in its investigation. The agency says it can now say in public that Harry Roque is the lawyer for both Whirlwind and Lucky South 99. As for Senate Minority Leader Coco Pimentel, he said it is clear that when Roque became a lawyer for private companies, he was no longer a government official and could practice his profession as a lawyer. But Pimentel added to end the entangled problems with Pogo, President Marcos should order the immediate halt of all Pogo operations in the country and give legal Pogos 1 month to wind down their operations.
All right, moving on over to the upcoming midterm elections. ACT Teachers Party List Congresswoman Franz Castro will be gunning for the Senate next year, alongside what the Mgabayan bloc says will be a full slate. Marian Enriquez reports.
The Mgabayan bloc is setting its sights on a full Senate slate for the 2025 midterm elections, starting with ACT Teachers Party List Representative Franz Castro. The group said it's prioritizing bets from their coalition and is now in the process of picking out nominees before finalizing their list in the coming weeks.
Nakahanda po ang Mgabayan na magpatakbo ng hindi lamang isa o dalawang senador, kundi buong slate ng mga Mgabayan at progresibong kandidato na magtatagla sa angkan ng mga mayayaman o mga dinastiya sa politika. Hindi korap.
So who will make up the rest of Mgabayan bloc's Magic 12? What we know for now is it could involve candidates from other parties.
Bukas naman kami sa nominasyon o suggestions ng ibang individual na kandidato na magkaroon ng pag-agree, pagkaisa doon sa ilang mga issue at sa plataforma.
The Liberal Party earlier said it was also open to alliances with like-minded parties. LP President Edsa Lagman said they would be fielding 6 candidates at most. But just like Mgabayan, no names have been released yet. And there have also been no formal talks yet between LP and Mgabayan.
Wala pang formal na usapan. Bukas ang proseso ng Mgabayan sa mga individual na may track record ng pagtindig sa mga issue ng bayan.
For now, political watchers are on wait-and-see mode to see whether these two parties will indeed be joining forces to go up against admin-allied bets and a possible Duterte bloc. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
Okay, we have some breaking news which just came in as that report was playing.
Still on Pogos.
Still on Pogo. So
the Court of Appeals has granted a freeze order on the accounts and assets of Tarlac Mayor Alice Guo and other entities and other people involved in the investigation in Senate.
Specifically Huang Qiyang and Lin Paoying. These individuals are suspected of orchestrating human trafficking and fraudulent activities through entities such as Tun Yuan and Bao Fu Land. So these are, the names that we have been hearing in the Senate investigation on Pogos.
Well, they did obtain some bank documents there, and the investigation uncovered significant financial transactions and assets amassed by these individuals, raising suspicions of their involvement in money laundering, human trafficking, and other illicit operations. And I believe that freeze order encompasses 90 bank accounts across 14 financial institutions, several real properties, and high-value personal property such as luxury vehicles and a helicopter. So lahat yun.
Wow. All
That's
the
right.
assets and accounts. 90 bank accounts across all the entities, and guess how many of those were under Mayor Guo? 36.
Wow.
One third of those frozen belong to, or at least are tied to Alice Guo.
Also, our Executive Secretary, Lucas Bersamin, has emphasized the urgency of this action. He said it is imperative that we take swift and decisive measures to halt the operations of those who exploit our financial system for illegal activities. I instructed the Anti-Money Laundering Council to file for a freeze order to ensure that the assets of these individuals and entities are preserved and cannot be used to further their unlawful schemes.
So walls definitely closing in on Guo and her associates. We're going to pause for a quick break right now, but right after that, China digs in and rejects the 2016 arbitral ruling once more on the eve of the award's 8th anniversary. We'll talk more about this with maritime security expert Ray Powell. Keep it here on One News.
Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here on One News.
On the eve of the 8th anniversary of the arbitral tribunal ruling, China has released a report reaffirming its objection to it. So it released a report in Chinese through state broadcaster CGTN and ChinaDaily.com saying the award has made the already complicated South China Sea issue even more difficult to resolve. 3 of the points that it laid out, let's enumerate. 1, the arbitration award is not a contribution to the international rule of law, disregarding the basic fact that UNCLOS does not regulate matters of territorial sovereignty. The tribunal ignored China's position and ruled on sovereignty over the islands and reefs in violation of the basic principles and the spirit of prudence and self-discipline. 2, it says the award was not written for fairness and justice and that it attempted to firm up the outcomes of the Philippines' illegal occupation and endorse the Philippines' unilateral claims by misrepresenting and misapplying UNCLOS and customary law with a long list of fallacies. And 3, it says the award is not a panacea for dispute resolution and that the South China Sea issue is so complex as it is related to so many countries and involved historical, political, legal, and other factors. It can by no means be resolved by a ruling of injustice that takes sides with one party against the other. That is a lot to digest. So here to talk to us more about this, we have with us again Ray Powell. He's the director of Sealight, a maritime transparency initiative of the Gordian Knot Center for National Security Innovation at Stanford University. Ray, good evening. Welcome back to our set.
Thanks.
Thanks
It's great
for
to be
being
back.
here.
Appreciate it.
So I just read a mouthful there.
Yes.
It was a long statement. We cut it down already as it is, but
Well done.
we at least identified its 3 main points.
Yep.
First off, I was wondering if you had any reaction to it.
So I spend so much time, unfortunately, in this current capacity, reading Chinese propaganda. It all just sort of looks familiar to me. So, for example, they make this point about, well, they didn't rule on territory, right? Well, actually, it was, the arbitral ruling was at the request of the Philippines, did rule that no island, reef, shoal in the Spratly Archipelago qualifies as
Territory.
as an island, which means that nothing there creates its own exclusive economic zone. So this is one of those things the Philippines was really keen to try to establish, because what they were concerned about was that China would try to then, assert an EEZ based on some claim that it had in the Spratly Archipelago. So all of these things, and of course, China essentially substitutes in its own domestic law to say, well, we recognize there's such a thing as UNCLOS, but it can't, those rules can't possibly apply here, because this, of course, is where China has historic rights. So, we just won't apply it in this particular place.
Even though they themselves are a signatory to
Yes.
UNCLOS.
Yeah.
Well, it is a mouthful. Probably we're going to get a long response in the anniversary tomorrow. But if we can't seem to have common ground or a set of facts to agree on, what do you think would be the basis for a fruitful bilateral meeting? I mean, coming off the 9th bilateral consultation meeting, how did you see that go for both countries?
Yeah.
And do you see dialogue happening with the assertiveness of China refuting everything in the 2016 arbitral award?
Yeah, I think that, it's fair to say that China will never, in our lifetimes, accept any part of the arbitral award. They're very, very dug in, and their entire, once they took that stand and then, sort of backed it up by building artificial features and and is now aggressively trying to enforce their position through these very aggressive moves that we see on TV all the time now. That has become sort of written in stone. Every child that goes through their education system in China knows that the South China Sea belongs to China all the way out to the 9 or 10 dash line.
That's definitely out of the picture. How then do we converse with China at this point?
So, I mean, I think it's really about trying to manage the tension, right? I mean, the tension is going to remain. It's just, can it remain at a lower ebb, right? And, you know, this is obviously one of those things. One of the things that I think we may have talked about this last time I was here. In fact, I think we did, was that when China goes into a negotiation, if your goal is to de-escalate, and they know your goal is to de-escalate, they will use that opportunity to try to reset the board in their favor. If they think that you want de-escalation more than them, they think that's a chip that they can play, you know. So it's very tricky business, you know, going into negotiations with China, and I'm sure that the people who are doing it know that very well.
Okay, well, picking up from that,
It's game theory.
It
Interesting.
is. But the last BCM that we had, which was just earlier this month, last week, I believe, you know, both sides were quite firm and reinforcing their stance, both the Philippines and China. So nothing new there, right? How do you see it moving forward? Are we going to be seeing any changes? Because I just want to know how that would kind of reflect in the next, let's say, resupply mission, which, as far as I know, and I think that all of us here, we haven't heard anything yet as a follow-up to the June 17 Halabalu, that one. How do you think it would reflect, given all these new statements that are coming out, and of course with the anniversary, 8th anniversary tomorrow?
Yes. Well, so I mean, it's what's going to be the next resupply mission, I think, is the question everybody's asking, right? And the Philippines will almost certainly not the government of the Philippines will not want to talk about what that's going to look like because, you know, the operational security and all those kinds of things. And so, but, you know, clearly the model that we all grew so used to and that it pertained all the way through March, that seems to be a dead letter at this point. That seems to be done. The AFP seems to embrace, you know, the idea that that was not getting them the success that they wanted, and so they've gone to something new. And so, you know, the question is operationally what's going to happen, and then were any, you know, did they make any breakthroughs in the BCM as far as how it happened? And the trick is, can the Philippines, and this was the trick even in the last time we met, you know, can the Philippines get China to take a step back and allow resupply to happen without surrendering the Philippines' right to resupply, you know, without sort of admitting that China has jurisdiction over Ayungin and Shoal at this point? And that's a tough thing, right? Because China has the preponderance of force. They have a lot of ships.
We talked about assertive transparency the last time that you were here. You said it helped us defeat China's gray zone strategy in 3 fronts: by building national resilience, by garnering international support, and by giving China reputational costs. But there have been parties questioning that strategy, assertive transparency, the government pursuing transparency as a strategy when it's supposed to be a tactic. Do you think it's time to change or pivot strategies? Are we getting the international support that we need at this point? Because we have talked about the Mutual Defense Treaty, but we're not really sure whether we're getting some help. And the Philippines has refused also to get help. And some are saying that other countries are just issuing statements without any teeth.
Yeah. So, you know, first of all, you know, as you may recall, I have advocated for the invocation of Article 3 or the request for consultations under Article 3 of the Mutual Defense Treaty. That's my personal view, is I think that would be very helpful and clarifying across the board for the Philippines to know what the U.S. is prepared to do, for the U.S. so that it knows what the Philippines would like, and for China to know that it's kind of got into this territory now, that its aggression could have some very, very dire consequences if we begin to talk about support under the MDT. So now, to your question, Gretchen, I really think that when you take a step back and look at all of what's happened, I think that transparency has gained the Philippines actually quite a good deal. I think, so let's just go back to even, say, the trilateral summit and all of the announcements that came out of that. The Luzon Economic Corridor, the deal on, the commitment to semiconductor manufacturing, or even just this nuclear power deal that was just announced, right? We've got then from Japan, you've got now this reciprocal access agreement has just been struck, so that will increase the military to military ties between the Philippines and Japan. Again, talk about the Coast Guard vessels that Japan is helping the Philippines with, the coastal radars, the dark vessel detection from Canada. All of these things happen for a reason, and it's hard to think that President Marcos would have been invited to give the keynote address at Shangri-La absent the attention the Philippines is getting for its security problems here in the West Philippine Sea. So I think that you are seeing real progress being made on the international front. I think you are seeing real resilience being built. Now, the one thing you could certainly say, it has not deterred China to date, right? And that is a fair criticism. And I think that, like the Mutual Defense Treaty, transparency isn't necessarily like an on-off switch. It's not like it doesn't have to be full transparency 100% of the time or zero transparency, sort of like it was before. You can adjust your tactic. You can use it strategically. You can use it thoughtfully. But I continue to believe that the Philippines has actually gained quite a good deal from transparency.
And so it has, maybe, but it hasn't deterred China, as you said. But also the other thing is, what the June 17 incident at Ayungin or Second Thomas Shoal has highlighted is that they may not have planned for anything beyond that, right? As evidenced by the radio silence in the days after that incident. The first word on that incident came from China, and then there were silence before the Malacanang finally spoke. And it felt to us like, okay, so you've got transparency. The whole world saw or could see what China's doing, but then what, right? What's the next step? What goes after that?
Like, I think to add to what Regina was saying, I think it exposed also the weakness in our general strategy, which a lot of people will argue. There are like a lot of schools of thought here. For example, Article 3 of the MDT, some pundits are of the opinion that by the phone calls between the peers, I say the defense secretary here, the defense secretary in the United States, the Secretary of State and the Foreign Affairs Secretary, they're saying these actually already fall under the invocation of Article 3. What are your thoughts on that?
So, yeah, what is an invocation of the MDT, right?
Exactly.
It is what you say it is, right? So if the government of the U.S. and the government of the Philippines say that we are having this conversation under the auspices of the Mutual Defense Treaty, then they are. If they say, we're just having a phone call and, trading recipes for chocolate chip cookies, then, it's whatever they say. And so what I have said is I think that I would like to see them formalized so that, we can sort of have this deep level of discussion at the appropriate levels and be very clear that this is the territory that we're in.
The BCM aside, one of our guests told us that he believes that Beijing has completely given up trying to work with the Marcos administration, as evidenced by the fact that they're putting maximum pressure on the resupply missions. Do you think that might be true?
I don't know. I think that Beijing has decided to make an example of the Philippines because it believes that other countries around the region are watching, and it doesn't want to give the impression that you can push back against China. I do think that Beijing, in the previous, when there was sort of this other model that was briefly a thing back in February, March, actually February, when we were talking about the perfect resupply and all of these things. I think that Beijing, whatever happened there, I think that Beijing has decided that that's the model that needed to happen, so that it was, the pre-notification, 2 days out before the Philippines does anything. And I think that now Beijing has decided that we will not permit one that doesn't have a pre-notification. So that's why you see, even when it's a medical evacuation, they're getting swarmed because Beijing demands to be notified. So I think that Beijing has tightened its blockade, my word, right? Or quarantine, or whatever we're going to call this regime that Beijing has put in place around Ayungin and Shoal that is now preventing resupply.
Because the bottom line is that it believes that if it puts enough pressure on the Philippines will eventually capitulate.
Right. So I think the point of the blockade before, I think, was maybe this ship will finally break up and slide into the sea. However, what if it doesn't and we're stuck doing this for a long time? Well, maybe we can actually compel the Philippines just to give up trying to crew the Sierra Madre.
So basically, where are the Philippines now?
Yep.
Do you agree? I want to know if you agree with the change in strategy that happened back in June 17. We saw, instead of civilian resupply boats, we saw Navy SEALs try to resupply the BRP Sierra Madre. Some would say that that was an escalation on the part of the Philippines. Others would say that it shows backbone in the way we try to resist the blockades around the BRP Sierra Madre. I want to know your thoughts on sending the Philippine Navy.
Well, first, I'd reject the idea that it's an escalation. I mean, this is a Philippine ship. It's a Philippine Navy ship with Philippine personnel on, military personnel on board. It needs to be resupplied, including a couple of rigid hold inflatable boats, rafts, filled with Navy SEALs to try to escort what is still a fairly small resupply boat. To me, that is not an escalation. So I understand. So I think what the AFP has decided is that what was happening before, while producing some extremely compelling footage, was not really working anymore. And China had decided, China's actions against those, when the Coast Guard goes out, Coast Guard ships broadcast on AIS, the automatic information system, the things that I can monitor. Of course, China can monitor those too. So if you're going to try to go in by stealth, you obviously can't have those boats with those ships with you, right? So that's what they tried to do. And I mean, I think in the end, your choices are basically four, right? It's 4 S's. You can do it by stealth, you can do it by strength, you can do it by suasion, or you can do it by surrender, right? That's basically the Philippines' 4 options in the end. They've already said they're not going to surrender. So, for stealth, you have to try to figure out how to get in through a very tight quarantine before China realizes what's happening. The problem is that the quarantine is extremely tight. For strength, the problem is that China has the preponderance of force, and it is very difficult for the Philippines to muster enough force to be, to sort of push through that. And then suasion, that comes back to having these negotiations and trying to convince China that somehow that it is in China's national interest to allow these to happen. And I think that's where you get back to the question of reputational costs. And what is China losing from all of this? And I think it's a lot. I mean, China has essentially united its adversaries against it, right? I mean, that's part of what this RAA with Japan is indicative of, right? Would that be happening
It's
today?
found new allies, though.
What's that?
It's found new allies.
China?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're also busy forging alliances.
Making their own. That's why the worry now is we're going to end up in a world where there's various geopolitical blocks.
Well, I think we're kind of already there, aren't we?
Well, some people would say we never actually left the Cold War, right? Everyone just kind of formed new groupings. But let's set aside the RA for a quick bit. I wanted to get a picture of what has been going on in the disputed waters in the South China Sea since June 17, because I know that it is kind of your hobby to take a look at what's going on. So can you paint us a picture of what has been going on there?
It's been quiet.
It's been quiet except for the medical evacuation, the boat that exploded.
At one point, they say China decreased the number its ships, right? During the BCN.
I mean, I followed your tweets.
So
They've been moving.
the ships do move, right? That is the thing about ships. And actually, I mean, right before I came here, I was taking a look at the ships around Ayungin Shoal, and for some reason today, all the militia ships that I was tracking went back to Mischief Reef today. No idea why. It's not something I usually see. Maybe they're just going to go take a break and be right back. I don't know.
There's a party of mischief.
So,
How many
How
are
about
there?
yeah,
How
the
many
number of
boats?
ships?
well, so again, these are the ones that I can
have
see.
AIS on
Right. So I saw 6 go back to Mischief Reef. So most of these were gathered around Ayungin Shoal. One of them was over at Sabina Shoal, but they all went back at the same time for some reason. There actually were 2 back at Sabina Shoal, but one of them keeps going dark, so I can't quite tell where it is. But the monster, China Coast Guard 5901, is still there at Sabina Shoal. And again, I think that probably for as long as Teresa Magbanwa is there, it's going to have a friend, at least one. And also, we see these rafted vessels will move around. So Sabina Shoal had a number of those, I'd say up to almost, say, 24 a couple of months ago, and more recently they haven't been there. Now, they usually don't go away entirely. It's been a little cloudy, so it's been hard to see where everybody is. But they'll go to Whitsun Reef, for example, or they'll go to other places.
Funny mystery. China's Coast Guard 5901 is there.
Yep.
Near Sabina Shoal.
Yep.
On the other side, you've got the aircraft carrier, Shandong, right? Passing through the northern Philippines on the way to drills in the Pacific. It's something that the AFP's monitored, but they said eventually that it's not something to be concerned about.
It's
Do you
innocent
think
passage.
that's do you think that's something? Do you think the fact that the aircraft carrier passed through very close to Philippine waters says something?
I mean, I think that, so it is innocent passage, right? And you are allowed to do that, and U.S. does that. So as long as and of course, innocent passage only applies within 12 nautical miles. So if you're outside 12 nautical miles, you can even do maneuvers if you want. And again, the U.S. does that too. I do think that, sort of in general terms, it's important because it shows that China is continuing to grow its capability. It's trying to expand. Now, it takes a long time to create a carrier force. And just having an aircraft carrier is just one step in a very long process of turning it into what the U.S. has been doing right since World War II and before. So it is still something very new for China. So it's a nascent capability, but it's an important one.
Your thoughts on the RAA?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, to add to that, coming into this conversation is Japan, which is for the longest time called its Army Self-Defense Forces. It has refused to, or it is not allowed in its constitution to have aircraft carriers. I think they have helicopter carriers, quote unquote. I want to know what you've been seeing. Have you been tracking Japanese ships out there? And what can you say about the pivot and Japan's posture?
I don't track the Japanese Navy, just like I don't track the Chinese Navy or the U.S. Navy, because they're very hard to track. They don't broadcast on AIS. They're not required to under International Maritime Organization policies, laws. So, you may know, I actually have a podcast I do with my former boss, Jim Caruso, and we had Admiral Phil Davidson on recently, who used to be the commander of Indo-Pacific Command, and he called Japan's new defense policy the most important development so far this century in terms of positive development. So I think that this is actually, having an RAA with Japan is a very important thing for the Philippines. I think you're going to see a more assertive Japan. So it is now reinterpreting a lot of those things that are in its constitution in a more forward-looking way or more forward-leaning way, so that it can handle or can get a grasp on this more aggressive China.
So you definitely see Japan stepping up in the region.
Absolutely.
Also a lot of issues in that, but that's for another day because we've run out of time, as we always do when we're talking to Ray Powell. Thanks so much for your time again tonight, Maritime Security Expert Ray Powell.
Thanks.
Moving on to business news now, tycoon Manny Pangilinan is snapping up another company, this time a dairy business. The Philippine Star today reported that he is buying Bukidnon Milk Company for some 700 million pesos. The goal is to increase the dairy supply for premium ice cream brand Carmen's Best, owned by the Laguna Creamery Company, which in turn, Pangilinan through Metro Pacific Agro Ventures bought a controlling stake in 2022. The Philippine Star quoted Pangilinan as saying that sales of Carmen's Best ice cream products have grown exponentially, and so they're running out of milk from their existing dairy farm in Bay, Laguna. In previous interviews, Pangilinan has lamented the inadequate dairy supply in the country, where he says more than 90% of demand is served by imported milk. He views the group's entry into dairy as another step towards food sufficiency. The Philippine Star also reported that Bukidnon Milk Company runs a 460-hectare grazing farm in Maramag, Bukidnon, the first and biggest of its kind in Bukidnon, at least, where cows are allowed to wander freely. And then also one quick disclaimer about that use. One News, of course, through its parent company Signal TV, is part of the MVP Group.
All right, this is another piece of news that we have been following for a while. The search for the fugitive Pastor Apollo Quiboloy continues, and with a 10 million peso bounty hanging over his head, the National Police Force is now getting more and more leads on his possible location. Julie Baiza with that report.
Since the wanted poster was released and the 10 million peso reward money was announced for the arrest of Pastor Apollo Quiboloy, the Philippine National Police started receiving more information about his potential whereabouts.
Hindi naman natin tatanggapin kaagad-agad po ito. Baka meron po doon ay nililigaw naman yung ating focus. That is not impossible, sir, na baka meron dyan na talagang tatawag para lang sabihin na nandito, para lang iligaw yung ating mga investigador at ating mga operatiba. That is why we are carefully validating the information being provided by those people calling po yung ating hotline.
The police say they see nothing wrong with offering reward money for information on Quiboloy. DILG Secretary Benher Abalos had earlier said that the fund was raised by private individuals who are dismayed about the slow pace of the case.
We have to also remember, this is not the first time ay private citizen ay nag-offer po ng reward. Alam po natin, pag may mga heinous crimes, even yung mga families po ng victim na mga civilian po ay nag-o-offer po.
For Vice President Sara Duterte, it's the government's rights to offer reward money. It can be recalled that the Vice President questioned the excessive use of force in serving the arrest warrant against the pastor, who is a close friend of her family.
Right man na siguro sa ato ang gobyerno and sa DILG nga magpagawas og rewards para sa mga wanted na mga tao kanang mga dunay warrant of arrest.
There is also speculation that Quiboloy is now in China, but the PNP believes that the pastor is still in the country.
There is also a possibility na dumaan po siya sa backdoor, pero lahat po yan ay bine-verify pa po natin. But as we speak po, naniniwala po tayo na there are indication at na nandito pa naman po yung mga hinahanap natin.
The PNP is also studying whether former President Duterte can be held liable for saying that he knows Quiboloy's location but refusing to reveal it. Former presidential spokesperson Sal Panelo says Duterte was only joking, but the PNP said this is not a laughing matter.
Well, with due respect po sa ating mga Pangulo, probably all of us knows po yung ating personality po ng Pangulo, pero yung mga ganito po na seryosong mga bagay po ay sana po ay hindi po natin ginagawang biro. Wag po nating kalimutan na yung kabilang party po na sumisigaw po ng hustisya, may mga batang allegedly di umano ay minolestya at naging subject for trafficking. This is very serious matter po, very serious offenses.
Moving on to Olympic news, another quick update. Our Olympic team is doing ahead of Paris 2024 because it is just 15 days away. This time, let's check on the weightlifting team. Barbell by barbell, rep by rep, our Philippine Olympic weightlifting team is hard at work at Sport Campus SAR in Saarbrücken, Germany, ahead of the Olympic Games Paris 2024. Ramping up their preparations are Elreen Ando, Vanessa Sarno, and John Seniza. With the country's first Olympic gold coming from weightlifting, all eyes will be on the three as they look to bring home another gold for the Philippines. Weightlifting will start on August 7 and conclude on August 11.
And just like that, we have run out of time totally and completely for tonight. So that's it from us three here at The Big Story.
We are One News, all sides all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.